Good afternoon. How's everybody? Great. So my name is Eloise Parker. I'm the Assistant Director for Demographic Programs at the Census Bureau, and I have been given this honor of welcoming all of you all to the Census Bureau to mark what is really an incredible milestone, and that is the 50th anniversary of the American Housing Survey. So I just want to say that for those of us at Census, this occasion is the highlight of what has already been a very eventful week. Yesterday, we held our first orientation for staff, so they may begin to re-enter this beautifully renovated building as early as October 7th. So for us, after working virtually from kitchen tables and jury-rigged desks for more than 4 years, it is a joy to see all of you all in real life, and as a first order of business in this space, that we are here celebrating the importance and the impact of the AHS today. So I want to thank HUD for the incredible foresight of launching the first AHS in 1974 so that this was timed perfectly this week. We knew you guys were powerful. So I'll confess that my career up until 2013 had been in the production of data in the education and the health sectors. But then I met Tamara Cole, who is a survey director for the housing surveys here at Census, and then I met Sean Buchholz and George Carter at HUD. The manner in which these individuals champion the power and the value of high-quality housing data truly comes from the head and the heart. There are no more foundational human needs than there is to have shelter. The AHS has for 50 years provided a reliable compass for housing policy that advances access to warm, safe, decent housing for Americans. I am delighted to share this stage this afternoon with 3 people who have dedicated their careers as champions for the production of high-quality housing data in the interest of rigorous research and policymaking. First, I want to introduce you U.S. Census Bureau Director Rob Santos, who has led our agency with distinction since January 2022. And in this time, he has been a wonderful advocate, and particularly for my programs, as we seek to modernize our household data programs. And he's someone who challenges us to think creatively about emerging needs for data in a very dynamic time, socially and economically. Before coming to the Census Bureau, Rob served as Vice President and Chief Methodologist at the Urban Institute, and as Executive Vice President and partner of New Stats. And he has held many other leadership positions as the nation's top survey research organizations, including NORC at the University of Chicago, University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research, and the Temple University Institute for Survey Research. He is a proud San Antonian, and from his lived experience, cultivates a real sense of joy in the diversity of American people and all of their walks of life. We are also delighted to have Solomon Green here, who leads HUD's Office of Policy Development and Research. Solomon has dedicated his career to improving people's lives and strengthening communities through evidence-based and community-driven housing and urban development policies. Prior to joining HUD, he was a senior fellow at Urban Institute, and I'm not going to say that perhaps there wasn't some collusion there. Collaboration, where he led research on fair and affordable housing, land use, technology, and inclusive growth and recovery in cities. Before joining the Urban Institute, Solomon served as a senior advisor at HUD, where he helped develop policies to reduce segregation and expand neighborhood choice. And then finally, George Carter is here today in his role as Director of the Housing and Demographic Analysis Division in HUD's Office of Policy Development and Research. George oversees HUD's Housing Market Surveys program, which includes the American Housing Survey, as well as the Rental Housing Finance Survey and other surveys which are conducted by the Census Bureau on HUD's behalf. Before joining HUD in 2013, George worked for 7 years at the Census Bureau, so he's coming home today, both in the Centers for Survey Research Methods, as well as 5 years as an AHS subject matter expert in our AHS survey branch. Without further ado from me, I'm going to turn the mic over to Rob and then to Solomon and George for their remarks, and greatly appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eloise, and hello everyone. How are we doing today? I want to see some smiles and high fives. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the American Housing Survey. Think about that, okay? Think about it. A half-century partnership that's enabled the Department of Housing and Urban Development to inform the American people, to inform them about the ways that we live in housing, what housing and occupancy look like, and our struggles and successes in finding and retaining housing. You know, in a sense, the AHS also reveals people's progress in achieving the American dream, you know, owning a home. Plus, the AHS is used in all kinds of critical policymaking at the federal, state, and local levels, as we know. All this is why we're honored and why we're privileged to be able to conduct this survey for HUD. Now, the Census Bureau serves HUD by providing the data that it needs to achieve its mission. Right? After all, housing is a fundamental human need. So forgive us for being really proud to support HUD and for playing a role in generating this essential benchmark data. Now, okay, allow me to brag a little bit, okay? The Census Bureau has a long history of measuring housing in America. We've done so regularly since 1850 in our population and housing censuses. That means once each decade, we learned how many homes there were in the country and how long occupants lived in them. And of course, those limited data, once a decade, weren't quite enough for the breadth of the policymaking that was needed in our country. In fact, before the AHS, we didn't know how much of our housing needed rehabilitation, whether the kitchen or heating equipment worked, or the extent to which home improvements were affecting the housing stock. We didn't know how the supply of rural housing compared to that of central cities. We didn't know how much families' housing costs changed from one year to the next. We had no idea what neighborhood services influenced residents to stay or to move out of their neighborhood. And we didn't know how much those who did move managed to improve their living conditions, or just the opposite. That's where the AHS comes in. This survey represents a major federal effort to find out these things and more. Since 1973, it's been our nation's most comprehensive go-to housing survey. The AHS provides foundational data on the size, composition, quality, and cost of our nation's housing and how it's changed over time. It tells us about the physical condition of homes and neighborhoods, about the costs of financing and maintaining homes, and about the characteristics of the people who lived in them. This information is so important for communities, for planners, and for policymakers, all of whom use the results of AHS to assess local and national housing needs. Its data is used to make evidence-based decisions about programs that affect people of all income levels, of all ages, and of all racial and ethnic groups. Okay, I've gushed enough about AHS, although honestly, I could go on, but I won't. But you know, the AHS wouldn't be the treasure that it is without the people who make it happen, right? So please indulge me while I give a few shout-outs. Yes, let's thank the staff who supported and continue to support the AHS over the past several decades, some of whom are here today. From HUD, they include my friend and former Urban Institute colleague, Solomon Green, who is Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy Development and Research. That's a mouthful. And there's Kurt Usowski, Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Economic Affairs. George Carter, of course, who we'll hear from later, who's Director of the Housing and Demographic Analysis Division. Sean Buckholtz, former Director of the Housing and Demographic Analysis Division. And we'd also like to acknowledge the contributions of Dav Vandenbroek, who was unable to join us today. Dav was a senior economist in the AHS who was a tireless advocate for the survey, ushering it through many seasons of change, including the major redesigns of 1977 and 2015. Now let's turn to some of the Census Bureau staff, many of whom are here today. Tamara Cole, AHS Survey Director, and her team who coordinate the surveys. Are you there? Raise your hands. Yeah, good guys, good for you. We also have here many of our housing subject matter experts, mathematical statisticians and programmers. We're also pleased to have a number of field supervisors and field representatives join us, I think. Who are they? Stand up, please. FRs and FSs? Or do we have any? Oh, man. Oh, yay. Okay, everybody crowd them after the. We also have some guests. Oh, our regional office staff who are here today. Raise your hands. These are the folks, along with the FSs and FRs, that make things happen, folks. We also have some guests who've retired from the Census Bureau after long careers in service to the American Housing Survey, forgive me. These folks include Dan Weinberg. Is he here? Dan, yeah. Hey, Dan. Former Chief of the Housing and Household Economic Statistics Division. Barbara Williams and Sue Lord. Are they here? Yeah. Yay. Who had long careers as subject matter experts on the survey. And Medell Ford. Yeah. Hey. Who oversaw field operations for many, many years. We thank you all for your years of service, and in some cases, decades of service on this survey. Your dedication is why the AHS is a powerful data tool that it is today. I also want to acknowledge and thank the Census Bureau field representatives who work on the AHS. You know, their work is some of the hardest in our agency. Their success requires true interpersonal skills. Seriously, they face incredible challenges every time they step out into the field. In a real way, they are the face of the Census Bureau to the public. They stand toe-to-toe, day after day, on the doorsteps of a statistically representative slice of America. And yes, they ask people to trust them. The fruits of their interactions and their labor are the AHS data. So thank you very much, folks. We really appreciate you. So thank you again to our field staff and our regional office staff for all you do. And you know, we're just so proud of this decade-long partnership with HUD, which has resulted in a lot of amazing data on Americans' housing. And we're also proud to be involved in improving this survey for the next 50 years. Hey, it's within our grasp to build a better and stronger AHS. really. Starting next May, AHS plans to move from a survey conducted every 2 years to a continuous operation with data collected every month throughout the year. How smart is that, right? Thank you for that decision. This will enable policymakers to focus on pressing issues such as housing insecurity, the impacts of climate change, accessibility, and the intersection of health and housing. And on that wonderful note, I and we thank everyone involved again for all the hard work that you've done. And I'll pass this over to Solomon Green. And as he walks up, I'll say, happy anniversary to the AHS.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Director Santos, Eloise Parker, Tamara Cole, everyone here today at the Census Bureau for hosting us and for joining us in this incredible celebration. Thank all of you who Director Santos mentioned, many of you by name, but we're so excited to have you here to celebrate not just the 50th anniversary of the AHS, but also 5 decades of strong partnership between the U.S. Census Bureau and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, when we've been working together to provide timely, reliable, high-quality data on America's housing needs, conditions, quality, and costs. That partnership is, of course, represented quite admirably here in the room today. I want to echo Director Santos's appreciation to the teams at Census and HUD and in the field who work together to make sure that HUD, other federal agencies, policymakers at all levels of government, researchers, and the public have access to this vital information. I am Solomon Green, and as Director Santos says, I have the honor to have the longest title in federal service. I serve as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for HUD's Office of Policy Development and Research. It is indeed a mouthful. Now we are at the Census Bureau, so I thought it'd be a good time to take a quick poll. How many of you have heard of PD&R, or the Policy Development and Research? Oh, wow, great. How many of you have worked or currently work in PD&R? Great. So I won't spend a lot of time saying what we do in PD&R, but suffice to say, we support everything that we do at HUD to meet the nation's housing needs and strengthen communities through the best available data, research, and evidence. And so our office, all of HUD, is grateful for the partnership with Census, but particularly our office, because we're not only work with you on the AHS, but we're consumers of the data and put it to use every day. So the one thing I do want to say about PD&R is we also just celebrated our 50th anniversary. PD&R was created in 1973. And as part of that celebration, we decided, because we are indeed nerds in PD&R, to do a lot of data analysis and reflection and looking back at our history to learn from it so we could understand how to improve over our next 50 years. And George Carter, who we'll hear from him in a minute, wrote a really excellent history of the AHS, which if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. By the way, I said I saw some concerned looks on your faces. I said nerds in a loving way. But maybe that didn't need saying, but in case you thought that was a criticism, it absolutely is not. So I won't do justice to George's detailed history of the AHS, but I did reread it last night, and I wanted to share with you some reflections that I learned again in the reread. There are 2 themes I want to share with you. First, PD&R and AHS were both born out of the same sense of urgency around housing and community development needs and the importance of data in meeting those needs. They, in the late 1960s, as we know, were a period of significant civil unrest and urban crisis. Urban riots led to the creation of several federal advisory committees and commissions, including the President's Committee on Urban Housing, which is better known as the Kaiser Committee. And the Kaiser Committee was tasked with investigating ways to supply a decent home and healthy surroundings, and by the way, this is in quotes, for every American family now imprisoned in the squalor of slums. The quotes were for that last part of the section, but importantly, it was a mission-driven committee that was taking a hard look at what at the time was one of the most urgent crises the nation was facing. In his article, George talks briefly about how the Kaiser Committee contributed to the creation of not just the AHS, but also PD&R. But because I am both an insomniac and an amateur historian, I actually went back and pulled up the full 260-page report, which, by the way, as a plug, is available in text searchable format on HUD User. So take a look. It's actually, reading it, you'll come to realize all that's new, whatever they say, but it's very familiar challenges, and the discussion was very familiar in the report. But it was my kind of report. They mentioned data 50 times. They mentioned evidence 20 times, and they mentioned research a whopping 173 times in the report. Throughout the report, committee members lamented the lack of reliable data at the time on the nation's housing needs in all aspects of American housing. And there's a really long section, my favorite section of the report, near the end, that describes the need to invest in research, statistics, and technology with a strong focus on the need for data on the core elements that are now the core elements of the AHS. Trends in housing conditions, compositions and costs, and changing patterns of occupancy. That section begins, given the pressing need for government to help address the nation's urban housing challenges, and given the token level of present support for research, strong measures are warranted. How I wish that would appear in a budget document today, but that's another story. It concludes with a discussion of how we need to secure a knowledge base adequate for the formulation of appropriate public policies dealing with housing activities that have been developed in the past, and how such policies could result in massive savings of resources in the American economy and actually reduce the total burden on federal taxpayers. As George discusses in more detail in the article, the committee report motivated and informed the development and passage of Title V of the 1970 Housing Act, which authorized programs of research, studies, testing, and demonstrations related to the missions and programs of HUD. As a result, HUD received funding that paved the way for the establishment of the AHS in 1972, and PD&R, my office, responsible for the AHS in 1973. So both PD&R and AHS have a common origin in the recognized need for better data, research, and evidence to solve the nation's housing challenges. The second big theme, as I was up late at night going through the report, is that AHS is constantly evolving and improving. George talks about this quite a bit in the article. The AHS has grown significantly. The first survey that was conducted has sample size of 60,000 housing units, and the most recent sample size, I believe, is 115,000, nearly twice the sample. But he also talks about how really great stories, like from the mid-'80s through the mid-'90s, when respondents didn't know the square footage of their unit, the interviewer actually took out a measuring tape and measured the unit for them. And there's even a picture of the standard issue measuring tape in the article. So clearly things have evolved since then. Our methods these days are much more technology-driven and hopefully more accurate and efficient. A major innovation over the years has been to match AHS data with HUD administrative data, for example, to identify HUD-assisted units for analysis. Another major innovation has been the use of rotating topical modules, and George will say more about those in a minute. And Director Santos previewed that we are currently innovating as we shift to continuous data collection. So these two features of the AHS, Utility for evidence-based and data-driven policymaking, and constant innovation improvement have powered AHS and the people working on it over the last 50 years. They also make the AHS the go-to source on the nation's housing needs, not only for HUD, but also for the broader field. At HUD, we use the AHS every day to inform our policymaking and program improvements and to understand the needs of households across income levels, ages, and racial and ethnic groups. For example, we use the data from the AHS to produce our biennial worst-case housing needs reports to Congress, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you also go to HUD User, I'm going to give a lot of plugs for the PD&R website. We have a dedicated page for HUD research that uses AHS data, and it has dozens of entries going back just for HUD research back to 1995. But AHS is also used by the broader field of researchers. George and his team in PD&R's Housing and Demographic Analysis Division also pulled together a bibliography and spreadsheet that includes all the academic journal articles and housing policy research papers that have been cited to the AHS going back to the early 90s. It is truly remarkable. It includes literally hundreds of articles in peer-reviewed journals across almost every imaginable discipline, from epidemiology and psychology to climate science and real estate economics. It isn't just the volume and the breadth of the research that is so impressive, but also how influential the research has been in shaping policy and program improvements. For example, the research using housing stability and eviction data from earlier AHS surveys helped shape the federal government's response to the impending eviction crisis early in the COVID-19 pandemic. Research on the eviction data included in a 2017 AHS module also informed the development of questions about forced moves and housing instability in the Census Bureau's Household Pulse Survey, which continues to provide valuable, timely data on housing payments and housing security that, again, we use almost every day at HUD. So we also look forward to continuing to work with the Census Bureau to ensure we gather even more updated, relevant, and accurate data on housing in the decades to come. But I was also asked to say a little bit about more, not just what we've learned about the AHS itself over the past 50 years, but what we've learned about America's housing markets over the past 50 years. So I don't have a lot of time to do that, but let me give you some highlights. So we know that since 1973, the housing stock has expanded dramatically. From 1973 to 2023, the number of housing units in the United States has nearly doubled, from 76 million homes to more than 145 million homes in 2023. We also know that our homes are larger. Of all owner-occupied units, 66% had 3 or more bedrooms in 1973, and that's risen to 81% in 2023. We know our homes are cooler, at least once you get inside and turn your central AC on, which is much more prevalent. Of all occupied units, only 17% had central air conditioning in 1973 compared to 74% in 2023. Fourth, the quality of homes has improved significantly. The percentage of housing units where heating systems broke down in the last winter was 8.3% in 1973 compared to 2.7% in 2023. Roof leaks were experienced by 7.6% of households. Today, only 4.4% of households experience roof leaks. The percentage of housing units with open cracks or holes in the walls decreased from 6% to 5.4%. Finally, we know that we face increased housing affordability challenges, and this should come to no surprise as people in this room. So while housing quality has gone up significantly over the past 50 years, there were housing affordability challenges in 1973 as well, but they have worsened in the intervening decades. I also wanted to say a little bit about just the past few years. So we also looked at what's changed since 2019 and 2021. I'm just going to share some top-line highlights here. The data are all now live on the Census AHS website, and most of you in the room are probably savvy on how to download the data files and use the table creator, and I encourage you to dig in. But we do know that home values have increased since 2021. Nationally, homeowner reported median income home values increased 16.7% at the national level in the 2-year period. Mortgage debt has also increased. Households with at least one mortgage or loan, among them, the national total amount owed increased 6.7%. So values increased much more significantly, but debt has increased at the same time. Total housing costs have increased for both renters and owners. And now median renters pay slightly more than owners do. Housing cost burdens have also increased since 2019, but interestingly, they have not increased since 2021. They appear to, for renters at least, have leveled out. Homeowners, this is a very exciting insight. Homeowners are making more energy efficiency improvements, especially for solar panels. There are over 3 million units more solar panels in just 4 years. The percentage of housing units with solar panels in 2023 was 5%, and increased a significant increase from 2.9% in 2019. So now I just want to say, just to close, a little bit looking forward before I turn it over to George to discuss the topical modules. And I wanted to come back to that sense of urgency with which the AHS was created and the role of data in rising to meet the moment. With this crowd, I don't need to belabor how important housing is to the health and vitality of the American people, our neighborhoods, our economy, and our nation. As Director Santos said, access to safe, stable, and affordable housing is a fundamental human need, but is also a platform for economic mobility, and I would argue a fundamental building block for our nation's economy and prosperity. We also know how great our housing challenges are, especially related to supply, affordability, and resiliency. A 50-year perspective teaches us about how much progress we've made, especially in improving the safety and quality of our nation's housing stock. But it also highlights how much further we have to go to meet the moment. I would argue forcefully, we can't get there without reliable, accurate, and timely data that the AHS provides. Because I'm not just an insomniac and an amateur historian, but also a mystery novel fan, I'm reminded of a not-so-famous quote from the legendary sleuth, Sherlock Holmes. In The Adventure of Copper Beeches, Detective Holmes explains with vocalized impatience, data, data, data. I can't make bricks without clay. So I can't do it quite as well as whoever acted him in the theatrical production, but you get the idea. As a lifelong housing policy researcher and now a policymaker, I can say we can't build the future of housing in America or form those policy bricks that will get us there without the data we need to make informed decisions. With that, I will turn it over to my colleague, George Santos. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am George Carter.
Did I say George Santos?
Yes.
Did I say that earlier?
No, you got it right earlier. Yeah.
Did you resign?
I know.
I was so relieved to make it to the Sherlock Holmes quote.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming today and joining us in the celebration of 50 years of the AHS. And to talk about the release of the 2023 AHS, which was released today. Starting in 2009, in an effort to minimize respondent burden, HUD began dividing AHS questions into core modules that are asked each survey year and rotating supplemental topical modules that are designed to meet HUD's needs for new topical content. This approach was recommended by the National Research Council. One of the topical modules that was asked in the AHS in 2023 was also asked in 2015, so that we can look at trends over time. All of the other modules that we asked in 2023 are new. So the health and safety characteristics module also known as the Healthy Homes module, was asked in 2015 and 2023, and other supplemental topical modules that we included in 2023 included modules on housing insecurity, power outages, heat risk, first-generation homeowners, and parents' place of birth. I'll go over what these modules covered and present some findings from each of them. First, housing insecurity. Through the questions in the housing insecurity module and other housing insecurity questions in the AHS core, HUD seeks to further index development research and ultimately to produce a housing insecurity index and a set of housing insecurity questions that other federal agencies and researchers can use in their own surveys outside of the AHS. A longer version of the housing insecurity module was included as an opt-in follow-on survey to the 2019 AHS. The goal of that module in 2019 was to produce data to be used in initial research into the development of a housing insecurity index and to identify a smaller set of questions to be fielded in a future AHS. The 2023 AHS was that AHS. So that smaller set of questions that were fielded in 2023 focused on households' difficulties in affording their home, residential instability, home conditions, and safety. In 2023, we found that renters were more likely than owners with a mortgage to report difficulty affording their rent or mortgage payment in the last 12 months. Renters also worried more than owners with a mortgage about making their monthly rent or mortgage payments. Renters were worried more about being forced to move than owners. In the healthy housing module, we had several major findings. About 1 in 6 households have at least one household member with asthma. 1 in 5 households with a household member with asthma had to visit an emergency room or urgent care unit due to asthma in the last 12 months. We found that between 2015 and 2023 that there is less tobacco smoke inside homes. The percentage of households that reported daily exposure to tobacco smoke inside their homes dropped from 8.1% in 2015 to 6.1% in 2023, a decrease of nearly 1.4 million households. Greater percentages of homes were tested for radon, but more testing is still needed. So 18% tested their homes for radon in 2023 compared with 16.5% in 2015, so small increase. Most residents trust the quality of their primary source of drinking water, but that trust has declined over time. While most households think their primary source of drinking water is safe to drink, the percentage who think it is safe to drink declined from 91.3% in 2015 to 87.6% in 2023. The power outage module that we asked was included to measure the extent to which householders experience power outages and the problems, and to document the problems that they experience because of these power outages. We found that 1 in 4 households experienced a power outage during the previous 12 months, and almost 1 in 10 households who experienced a power outage had to leave their home and stay somewhere else overnight due to the outage. Among households who experienced power outages, resulted in problems such as spoiled food and medicine, missed work, frozen pipes, and water in basements due to sump pumps that stopped working. We asked households in 1 unit and 2 to 4 unit buildings if they had a generator, and about 1 in 5, or 21%, said they did. There have long been questions in the AHS on heating problems, but 2023 was the first year the AHS asked similar questions about cooling problems. In addition to adding cooling problem questions to the core, a topical module was included on heat risk that measured the vulnerability of housing units to extreme heat. We found that 1 in 10 households said their homes were uncomfortably hot for 24 hours or more at some point in the last 12 months. For over a third of these households, the discomfort they experienced was due to cooling equipment breakdowns. 1 in 3 households, or 43.5 million households, say that in hot weather, their homes are cooled not very well or not well at all without an air conditioner or other cooling device. Around 10 million of these households are in the South, or 38.7% of households in the South. About 1 million households in the South reported a household member going to the emergency room in the prior 12 months because of the heat. Homeownership is a major factor in wealth accumulation, and promoting homeownership is one of HUD's strategic goals. The AHS has long asked about first-time homeownership, but 2023 was the first time we asked whether householders were first-generation homeowners. First-generation homeowners are householders who are owners and whose parents or parents-in-law never owned a home. We found that 1 in 10 householders is a first-generation homeowner. Many of first-generation homeowners are Hispanic, fewer young adults, and they are more likely to have a high school education or less when compared to other homeowners. In 2023, HUD added questions to the AHS on parents' place of birth to determine the generational status of the householder. This question allows us to calculate whether the householder is in the first generation, whether they were born outside of the US, whether they're second generation, whether that's if they were born in the US to at least one parent born outside of the US, or whether they're third generation. That's where both householder and parents were born in the US. Adding these questions makes it possible to analyze the housing market experiences of new immigrants and to compare them to the descendants of immigrants. More than half of first-generation householders are homeowners. Over 1/5 of homeowners are either first-generation or second-generation homeowners. Among first-generation householders, 54% are homeowners. Among the second generation, 60% are homeowners. And among the third generation and later, 68% are homeowners. Same-sex relationship questions were first tested in the AHS in 2013 and incorporated into the core of the AHS in 2015. In over half of households, the householder is married or cohabiting with their spouse or partner present. Of these coupled households, 98% are in an opposite-sex couple and 2% are in a same-sex couple. The 2023 AHS included questions on sexual orientation and gender identity for adult respondents, and a test of proxy sexual orientation and gender identity questions for other adult household members. In household surveys, there's typically one person who answers all of the demographic questions for all household members. In other words, all questions for all the household members are answered by proxy. The AHS test is a part of a wider series of research projects evaluating sexual orientation and gender identity proxy data collection approaches and the accuracy of sexual orientation and gender identity proxy measurement in the American Housing Survey and the American Community Survey. For the 2025 AHS, the next AHS, HUD plans to include topical modules on home accessibility, arts and culture, climate risk and insurance, and accessory dwelling units, as well as a question on household member contributions to rent, mortgage, and utility payments. As Solomon and Director Santos mentioned, planners, policymakers, and community stakeholders use the results of the AHS to assess the housing needs of communities and the country. HUD uses the AHS to develop evidence-based policy and produce several recurring reports to inform its policymaking. And data from the AHS are also the primary input into Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies estimate of the size of the remodeling market. On Census's AHS website, tables and microdata are available to the public now for the most recent AHS, all the way back to the 1973 Annual Housing Survey, which is what it was called at the time. With the AHS Table Creator, tables can be generated back to 2011. As we look forward to the next 50 years of the AHS, HUD and Census are pursuing innovative solutions to address the challenges of increasing field costs and declining response rates, challenges the AHS shares with other household surveys collected by the Census Bureau. Starting with the 2025 AHS, HUD and Census plan to move the AHS data collection approach from a 5-month data collection every other year to a continuous data collection approach. HUD believes that continuous data collection will be more effective primarily because it eliminates expensive, time-consuming ramp-up costs every 2 years and puts in place a more experienced AHS workforce with a constant workload. An added benefit is that we'll be able to increase the frequency of AHS estimates, allowing for more current estimates and better comparability to other data sources which collect annual data, like the American Community Survey. The survey will continue to be longitudinal, interviewing the same unit every 2 years. The AHS would not be possible without the hard work of HUD and Census staff who have designed, managed, collected, processed, tabulated, and analyzed the data over the last 50 years. I would like to thank my staff at HUD, everyone we work with at Census, and anyone who has ever worked on the survey. Thank you, Director Santos, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary Green, Associate Director for Demographic Programs, Eloise Parker, and Housing Surveys Director Tamara Cole for marking and celebrating 50 years of the AHS today. Lastly, but not leastly, I would like to thank AHS data users. For the last 50 years, the AHS has been a rich data source that has helped us understand how housing changes over time and how households' experience of housing has changed over time. As we continually work on improving the survey, we appreciate the questions we receive from data users and the suggestions they give us for improving the survey. HUD collects the AHS in part because it provides the information that HUD needs to develop evidence-based policies. But the AHS is also a public good. Anyone can explore and analyze AHS data, and we encourage everyone to do so. We seek to make AHS data as accessible and user-friendly as possible. There is something in the AHS for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. Because we're an agency and agencies that value precision, I wanted to actually acknowledge my boss is Tori Velkoff. She's the Associate Director for Demographic Programs. You all were not aware you got the B team with me. I'm the Assistant Director. So, but I want to acknowledge Tori's leadership, Dave Waddington, Tony Tercine, my partners in crime on the division chief level, the executive level. It takes a village to do a survey like this. And if you are a statistician, if you program the instrument, if you did cognitive research on all of the content that George just enumerated, and first and foremost, last but not least, the field staff that's here, I want you guys to stand up. I know that Rob acknowledged you, but really and truly, it is, thank you all for doing this. The amount of charm offensive that you bring to that doorstep is unbelievable. I don't have it in me to do that job. And I often say to people, when you sample households across America, you're not just getting the nice ones. You're getting the busy ones, you're getting the angry ones, and yet you all extract the cooperation to complete a long series of questions so that this country can be better off in terms of the way that it approaches housing in this country. So we are incredibly grateful for the work that you do. I also want to acknowledge that I think I said that this launched in 1974, and much to my chagrin, picked up a data wheel that said 2023. So I don't know if any of you all knew Kirk Walter or not. He was the chief statistician at NORC, and as he was sitting next to me and I was adding up on hard copy a bunch of budget numbers and struggling without a calculator, he said, "It's okay, I'm not good at arithmetic either." So I do want to acknowledge that indeed we're celebrating the 2023 data release. With that, I believe, Tamara Cole, that there are cakes and goodies and things out in the lobby, so please take a moment to enjoy that, enjoy everybody's company, catch up with each other if you haven't seen each other in 4+ years. And thank you so, so much for coming.